When folks say that it's not unseasonable weather, I don't know what they're talking about because it's definitely been some unseasonable weather around the Carolinas and everything. Christmas just passed by and it was around 65 or 66 degrees on that particular day. And I actually had to work at a cultural arts center that I am part of the day after Christmas. And on that day, it was pushing probably even closer to 70 degrees. And I think we might have had a couple of days of 50s and 60s. And definitely, I think there's even some talk of some more 70s as we head into the beginning of January. So even though the calendar may say winter, the weather is feeling more spring and summer like. And definitely, while I go outside and enjoy that, because I am not a big fan of the cold, even though I did go to school in Milwaukee, that was 5 winters enough for me. And of course, we've had some winters where we've had snow and maybe even some blizzards here in the Carolinas, but they usually melt after a while. So that is the good part about being here in North Carolina and all of that. But definitely, that's some of the things that are going on. And of course, people are still trying to figure out about school situations with the pandemic, as there is another variant that is out there and things along that line. So I know that where I'm at, Duke University has said that they will delay opening by about a week or so as they try to figure out what's going on in that regard. So I think they're going to have about a week of in-person education. I mean, not a week, but a week of online education, and then they may be bringing them back onto campus and seeing how that goes in that regards. So that is some of the things that are happening in there. And of course, people are just hoping that 2022 will be a better year than 2021 and definitely better than 2020. So people are hoping that we are slowly getting out of this pandemic and that maybe 2022 can see a more rapid getting out of it and that things can return back to some semblance of normal, even though a lot of folks that I'm talking to are feeling that we're in the middle of this new hybrid identity that will be a combination of in person and not in person. So it might be that you're at your job part of the time and you're at your house part of the time if you're in that work environment. At least that's what some of the folks that I've been talking to here on the network, as well as just in life in general, have been telling me about what they are expecting and all of that. But I had a conversation not that long ago. It was actually on one of our other shows, the Online Dinner Party, and had two folks that had a pilot background and one that did not have a pilot background, but she had said that she had gone skydiving and she really enjoyed that skydiving experience. And I had actually mentioned that I had been approached about going skydiving with a friend of mine, actually a young lady that I was dating at the time. And I told them that I was perfectly content with my feet on the ground. And I was not trying to do any of that skydiving or any of that other kind of adventuristic kind of things, even though I have contemplated hot air balloons and maybe even hang gliding, which is probably just as dangerous, if not more dangerous than hang gliding. But just something about falling out of a perfectly good plane that might get me from point A to point B wasn't making much sense to me in that regards and all of that. But I've got a guest on from Australia, Queensland, Australia to be exact. And it seems like he's done all kinds of amazing things, including being a world-class skydiver, a cyclist. Seems like he's been involved with a lot of other things in life as well. And of course, one of the things that I oftentimes talk about on my show is self-sabotage. So I'm really interested to see what he's got to say about that whole conversation, because we've had that conversation with a number of our guests and all of that. So I'm going to bring Bill up and we're going to talk about how things are going in his part of the world, all the way on the other side of the globe. So it's always good when we can get guests from around the world doing various things and all of that. So getting ready to bring Bill on and have a very engaging conversation with him and see what he's got happening in his life. So how are you doing, Bill? Like I said, how's life treating you? How's this pandemic treating you? And how's the weather treating you? Because I know that there's some people that are like, hey, there's nothing wrong with the climate. It's like it's always been. And I'm going like 70-degree Decembers. I'm not sure that I'm used to that. And I'm not sure that I quite agree with you. But if that's what you want to believe, knock yourself out.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And we've had some extreme weather here in the past in Australia. As I was saying earlier, we right now it's kind of rainy outside, It's cooler. It's 24 degrees centigrade. I'm not quite sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's probably in the 70s, somewhere like that. But the good thing about having rainy weather, it means we're not having bushfires. And 2 years ago, we were pretty much on the news around the world with the very bad bushfires that we're having here. And that seems to be, like when talking about weather, the weather that we're having seems to me, from my perspective and my age, getting more and more extreme.
Yeah.
But right now, it's kind of cloudy outside. It's cooler. Hey, I'm loving it. And we live in an eco village, so we don't have street lamps. We have a dark sky policy. We don't have dogs and cats here, so we have lots of kangaroos, koalas, Australian wildlife hanging out in our garden, basically. So it's kind of quiet here at this time of year. A lot of people go away, even though, we can't travel as we used to. People still do go away, at least in Queensland. So it's a lovely time to be alive.
Sounds like it. But you just mentioned that you have seen kangaroos and koala bears in your backyard. I know here we get excited if we see rabbits and squirrels, and really get excited if a deer comes grazing around and all of that. But that being said, I've heard that kangaroos and I don't know about koala bears, but definitely kangaroos can be a little bit on the vicious side. So I'm just wondering, how often do you see them, and are they nice to the citizens there, or do y'all just try to keep a distance from them? Because I've heard that kangaroos can have a little bit of a temper.
Well, we treat the animals here as wild animals, so we give them respect. We don't encourage anyone to feed them, rubbish, bread, whatever. So we love our kangaroos. They're such beautiful animals, especially when the little joeys, the little ones, just get out of the pouch for the first time. And they don't really know what their legs do. So they've got these springy kind of legs, and they bounce all over the place, especially if they're having a drink from mum, and then they go running around like crazy. But out west, like out in the outback or the bush, then the kangaroos can be more of a problem. And, some farmers will not like them at all because they'll eat their crops. They'll do a lot of damage. But where we are, we love them. And we're not, we've seen some pretty bad fights. Like when a kangaroo is like really angry and pissed off and he wants to beat the heck out of something, his big back feet, they pound each other. And we've seen fights that we know have ended in death. They don't bother us. We can walk, a couple of feet away from them. They won't even blink. They're so used to us, but we treat them with respect, and that's as we should do. They're wild animals after all. But we're pretty lucky. Like when we tell people we have kangaroos hanging out in our garden, it's like, that's pretty amazing. But it's amazing, like if you've got moose or deer hanging out in your garden, we go, wow, that must be crazy. Or brown bears or grizzly bears or whatever. It's like whatever is native, like we kind of appreciate that.
Oh, you definitely appreciate it. I know that one time I was going to visit that same lady that I was talking about. There was the one that wanted to try to get me to skydive and everything, and was staying with her at a point in my life. And I would catch mass transit, which I'm a big mass transit person, from Durham to where she was living, and I was living with her in Raleigh. And I remember there was a little bit of a trek that you had to make to get from the downtown area to where she lived at, maybe a couple of miles and everything. And from the bus stop, the closest bus stop, and I remember literally stumbling across some deers just grazing out by like a industrial area, like a couple of industrial businesses and things of that nature. And I'm going like, and they did, like you said, they just kind of like raised their head, made sure that I wasn't trying to interfere with them. And when they saw I was going on my way, they went about their business and I went about mine. So they were perfectly happy. I was perfectly happy as well, but I did get a chance to actually see them and enjoy their company, at least for a hot minute, and see them grazing. And they, like I said, they saw that I was not trying to interfere with them. So they said, yes, just go right ahead and keep on trucking, and Will's going to do what we're doing as well. Now, I know that I mentioned earlier with working with skydivers. I assume that if you worked with them, that you might have done it yourself. But then it occurred to me that might have been an incorrect assumption. But you've also worked with cyclists and triathletes and golfers, and some of these folks that people sometimes consider well, definitely athletes, and in some cases, extreme athletes. So, how much of this stuff have you done yourself?
Okay, so some years ago when I had, it's crazy how things just turn out. One Christmas, I was talking to a friend. He'd just done a skydiving. I'm going, wow, that sounds great. I'd love to do that. 3 weeks later, we get a phone call, myself and my business partner, from the manager of the Australian national skydiving team, and he had heard us on an interview on radio and wondered if we would go and train with them. So I talked to my partner, Brendan O'Hara, and said, let's go skydiving. He said, sure. So we trained with them for 10 days. We did 14 jumps from 16,500 feet. We did 5 jumps in one day, 3 before lunch, and my adrenals were absolutely just shattered. But these were crazy guys. They were so much fun. But basically, Brendan was teaching them kinesiology, and I was teaching them about communication, about mental habits, emotional stability, all these kind of things. So that was a fun time, I've got to say. And 16,500 feet, it takes you a long time to get up there. It doesn't take you so long to get down. But we did all kinds of things like formation stuff, flying through the sky like Superman, doing backflips. It was just so exciting. But yeah, that was a one-off. Like, we were with them for 10 days. And my daughter, when she was 14, because she knew that obviously that I've been skydiving. So for her 14th birthday, and this was a surprise, I drove her to the local airport where they have skydiving, and her birthday present was a skydive. And she was so excited, I'm so glad to say. And she was fearless. Like, look, the scariest jump was the second one, because the first one I had no idea what was going to happen. The second time, I knew exactly what was going to happen. But for her, she was 14. She just absolutely fearless, jumped out. No big deal at all. So there you go.
Well, she didn't mind that at all. Now, I know my brother had tried to be one of those endurance races where you do multiple type of things, whether that's bicycling, whether that's jumping over things. I think it was one of those really heavy ones called the Mud Racker or something like that. And of course, they're all over the country, and they're those really intense ones that people sometimes get involved in. And in both cases, I think he only tried it twice. I don't think he ever made it on a third time. He managed to injure himself. So I think we as family members were like, nope, this is not for you. We don't want you ever doing it again. And I think he got the message. So he stopped doing it and all of that. So that being said, what was it like working with triathletes? Because I imagine that if they're going to be doing bicycles and swimming and running, and they're running a whole marathon, I forget how long you're swimming, but I know it's a lot. And I know it's a lot on that bicycle as well. You've really got to be in shape, something that I definitely am not. So I was just wondering what that experience was like, and whether you run any of those triathlete races yourself.
No, I've done a half marathon. That's as far as I'll get. But it's interesting working with, triathletes and kayakers, etc. Their level of intensity and commitment to their sport is scary. Like, we work with one world-class athlete, and she was a world champion. And so when you're world champion, what do you do next? And she had kind of like lost her mojo a little bit. But anyway, we talked to her, and we happened to find out one of her values was about being the best that she could be. And so we said, well, how are you going to feel if you're coming second? And it just lit something in her eyes, and she got that fire back. And so she just wanted to, eat my dust kind of thing. But for that period of the competition, there was nothing else in her life, like nothing. Family, no. Friends, no. Pure dedication to that. And I don't know if you've heard of Layne Beachley. She's the 7-time women's national surfing champion. And there was an interview on her on TV last week. And so with her first world championship, she was so dedicated and so highly focused, and so determined. But she had like an epiphany, and after the 6th one, she kind of chilled out a little bit. And instead of being so driven to do it, she learned and discovered that just having heaps and heaps of fun was actually way better for her. And that's when she got her 7th national title. So she said, it's like when you can really enjoy something, and this is what I've come across with the kind of people that I've worked with from all kinds of different spheres. When you're really enjoying what you're doing, you don't have to be so crazily, insanely driven to get to where you want to go. And for me, she was a great example of someone who just followed her heart and let the flow be there, and not so detached, not so attached to the end result, but got to the end result anyway. So it was an interesting paradox. And sometimes when you just allow flow to be, she said it was almost effortless. She was still doing the stuff, but it was almost effortless, whereas before the driven, so like the two different paradigms of how we can behave as human beings, which I thought was really, really quite interesting.
No, definitely. And speaking of those paradigms, historically speaking, way back in the earlier days, definitely I was born in the early 60s, so late 50s now, but definitely folks that are like in my dad's generation for sure, and probably even my granddad's generation, those that would have been born in the 20s and 30s and things along those lines. There was this kind of attitude of you went to work for the corporation and you stayed in the corporation forever and a day. And that's kind of where you made your stake in life and in career. But now it seems like the young people of today are having like anywhere from 15 to 20 careers. And a lot of the careers are also very hybrid in the sense that they are partially at home and partially on the workforce, being whatever that corporate office is and things of that nature. So we seem to be moving more and more into this hybrid version of work, particularly with the pandemic. But in talking to people, they don't think that it's going to change even after we get out of the pandemic. No. So just wondering your thoughts about the new work model.
Well, I got to say, the old work model of working for the corporation for 50 years and then getting a gold watch, in my view, always sucked anyway. Well, it's kind of, I understand, what was happening at that time. But it meant that you basically gave up your soul for a handful of coins. And for me, that goes against, what I kind of believe in. So these days, a lot of younger ones, 30-year-olds, whatever, will look at a company and they'll look at what kind of a corporate citizen are they? What kind of a social citizen are they? And I know they will take less money to work for a purpose-driven or more heart-centered company than one that's just going to give them a bunch of money for their skills that they've got. So they're really using their values to decide where they work. And for me, I'm going, good on you. Like, if you find something that you really love, that really, makes you come alive, it's way better doing that than because I know people that have got degrees because they thought they should have, and they get their degree and they do something completely different. Now they've got the degree, so their parents are happy. Mum and dad go, my son, daughter's got this degree. They're going to do something completely different because they're following their heart. My daughter changed her degree 3 times, and she said to me on the second time going to the third time, she said, Dad, is that okay with you that I change pathways? I'm going, I don't care if you change 100 times. If you end up doing something that you love, then go for it. Because I see so many people, and in my career over the last 40 years, I've seen a lot of people doing work that they hate, but they think that they have to because they have no choice. And I disagree with that. So I said to her, I don't care how many times you change, find something you really love, you can put your heart into it. And she did.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What made you decide after you had worked all those many years in corporate America, working for both multinational as well as national corporations and definitely international corporations, that you wanted to step out and write this book and everything, and actually a series of books? So what caused you to be like, hey, I want to pass this knowledge on to people and not just be known as the corporate person, but I also have this other skill of writing?
So this is actually my 5th book. The first book I wrote was 30 years ago, and it's called Stop Procrastinating. And it's interesting, there was an article in the paper about it, my business partner Brent and I, in the Melbourne Age, which is a well-known paper in that city. And the editor of Random Centuries saw a cartoon that had been made about one of the comments that I made about procrastinating. So they approached us and said, do you want to write a book? And I'd been wanting to write a book in the back of my head for years. And I said, sure, what do you want me to write on? You know, bold as brass. And he said, well, about procrastination. And I thought, great. So they gave me an advance, which is quite a fair bit of money in those days, 30 years ago. And I wrote the book in, I think, 3 to 4 months. Then I sent it off and it came back from the editor with red ink all the way through it. And I felt like I was at school. It took me another 3 months to pick it up and go through all the editing. So I had another level of procrastination, lived experience, not just the theory. So, but I'd learned a long time ago, and coming back to what I'd said before, that if you're not doing something that you really love, then what the heck are you doing? So I'd written a couple of other books. One was about work-life balance. There was another one about insider selling. There's another one about insider golf. Not that I play a lot of golf, but it was more about the inside, the mental part of golf. So I don't know if you've heard, Mark, the story of the old lion and the young lion. Do you know that story? But let me tell you anyway for your listeners. So the old lion is, battle scarred, and he's been around for a long time. He's sitting up on a little hill, and he can look over and see his kingdom. And he looks down, he can see this young lion, and the young lion's full of piss and vinegar and dreams and aspirations, but not too many scars. So he doesn't have a lot of experience. And the old lion looks down and goes, wow, look at that young dude. I remember what it was like to be, full of, spunk and ideas and, change the world, etc. And I'd love to tell him some of my stories, but, what would he want to listen to an old fart like me? And then you go down to the young lion. The young lion looks up and he sees the old lion. He goes, wow, look at him, battle scars. He's done everything. He's such a legend. I'd love to talk to him just to get some of the juice of what he's been through, tell me some stories. But hey, why would he want to talk to a young guy like me? And the truth is, the old lion and the young lion need each other. Mm. The young lion needs to, I reckon we all need mentors in our lifetime. Either in our professional life or in our personal life, we need people that have been there beforehand, not to tell us what to do, but to guide us and to maybe bounce some ideas off so we can, we don't have to learn all the lessons of life the hard way. We can listen to somebody else who's been there. And for the old lion, it's like we get to, because we're both kind of old lions, I guess, Mark, at a guess, we're both over 40 anyway.
Yes, definitely.
So part of the buzz is to share some of our experiences and know that we're dropping seeds, hopefully of wisdom, into somebody else that can pick it up and do it in a different way. So we can spread and take some of the things that we've experienced and maybe help someone along the way. And it's a natural thing, I think, for human beings to do. So this book really, over the last 8 or 9 years, I've been facilitating and participating in men workshops here and gatherings in Queensland and Australia. And I've been doing workshops on different things. And one lunchtime, I was just listening to conversations around the meal table, and a lot of men were just expressing that they found it difficult to take criticism or feedback, either from their partners or in their work life. And I'm going, hey, that's a new workshop. About time I did something different. So the next year I ran a workshop on how to be bulletproof from criticism. I think that's what I called it.
Right.
And that went down really well. People really liked it. So then I put it into a course on Udemy, and so I had 2 hours and 40 minutes of video, just taking different stories and things that I've learnt, from my own personal experience of dealing with criticism. And there was one story in particular when I'd been training for about 5 years. So I was new, really, in the training field. And I was talking to a group of special education teachers. So these people had at least a master's degree in education, if not a PhD. And I don't have a degree in education, but I knew a whole bunch of stuff that they didn't know. So I was teaching this group went over 8 weeks, and I was talking about a model called transactional analysis, which any of you listeners aren't aware of that. You can just go search and find it. But it's a very simple model of human behavior. It talks about the critical part of us and the nurturing part, etc. Anyway, I made the comment that I didn't think that guilt was a good way of getting kids to do things. And these were special education teachers. So I had made the assumption that they would be more compassionate, more tolerant. And in 19 out of 20 cases, that was true. But for this one woman, she just blew her stack. She launched into the most vitriolic attack I've ever experienced in my entire life. No one's come anywhere near close to her. And so I had to be able to deal with her professionally, not attack back, because that would have been disastrous for everyone, and keep my cool. But in the end, I was able to keep my calm. And it was a game of chess. I had her in checkmate in 2 moves with 2 questions. So those kind of experiences that I had, I was able to bring into this book. But also, I have to say, the wisdom of the book isn't mine. I've gleaned that wisdom from old lions, mentors of mine. And sure, the stories are mine, but I've basically gathered bits of, I think, deeply profound stuff and simple stuff, and put it in a way that people can easily access. It's a 2-hour read. The book is a 2-hour read, and the feedback I'm getting, it's easy to read. I've made sure that it's conversational, it's easy to read, it's not complex, it's not an academic book by any means, but it's just basically to help people to deal with 2 things. One is criticism from the inside and criticism from the outside, because both can be kind of tricky if you don't know how to deal with them. So that's really how the book came about.
No, and it's very interesting. A lot of those things were very, very much resonating with me and everything. I know that one of the things that the founders of this network talk about, International Broadcast Media /Pod TV, is that they are frustrated with the American education system, and maybe even the global education system, but particularly the American education system, because they feel that it is teaching 18th century values in the 21st century. So that story that you were talking about, that particular teacher, they would probably enjoy it because they feel that we're not learning about fiscal responsibility and how to be financially established, and we're not learning a lot of other things that are probably skill sets that we need, even basic skill sets like home economics and things to do with your cars and plumbing and things of that nature. But we're so busy on things that might have been very much valuable in the 18th century, but we're not learning some of the things, including music and including some of the things that are needed in the 21st century, like STEM and STEAM kind of things, as much as they feel we should be, if I can kind of paraphrase some of their complaints. But I was wondering, are you seeing similar kind of things there in Australia? Because I know that they bring that up on a regular basis, because here in America, a lot of folks are definitely teaching to the test, because we have a lot of standardized tests, and people are actually teaching toward those tests.
Yeah, we have the same thing here. We have, teaching to the test. I know quite a few teachers, but I also know some teachers in some more progressive schools, and where arts and music is as valid as maths and English, and it needs to be. But also part of their curriculum is dealing with emotional intelligence, because they say that IQ will get you your job, but your emotional intelligence will keep you a job. So, communication skills, negotiating, how to get to win-win, how to deal with, with sensitivity and humanity towards each other, and how you can create a culture whereby people, want to bring their best game into it in a way that's humane. And for a lot of mainstream education here in Australia, we don't see that because the curriculum is getting, like when you and I went to school, it was relatively simple. There was like maybe 10 different topics, subject, and that was it. Now you could do this, you could do this, you could do that. What about this? What about this? It's so much, and the world is so complex. So how do we, get back down to some of the basics that human beings need as a culture to survive and to thrive, without getting lost in all the different things that we can do? And so I don't have any answers about that, except that maybe we need to understand that human beings need, we need things like art, we need music, we need sports, You know, when I went to school, every afternoon we would play sport, whether you liked it or not. You would be playing some kind of sport. Nowadays, it seems to be an additional thing if you want to do it. But if you're not active, and especially if you look at the health and, you know, the diet that people eat, I don't know what it's like in America. Well, I actually do, because I've been to America a couple of times. And I have to say, some of the dietary things I saw over there, I'd pass.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, just a comment from an outsider. We have the same problems here. But for me, you know, like diet, exercise, silence, time to eat to yourself, all these things help us be better human beings than just getting a full and dealing with, you know, my day and your day, we didn't have social media, thank goodness for that. So that's a whole new thing. You know, in my day, if we were bullied at school, it stopped at the school gate, because then we went home.
Right.
But now bullying goes with you 24 hours a day. Well, that's if you've got your phone on, or your cell phone on. So, you know, kids these days have to deal with things that are completely different from how we used to have to deal with life.
No, you're very much right about that. I was actually just thinking about, as you were thinking about that whole deal with exercise, and I had actually shared this on a previous show and everything, but I remember that I've always been a good networker and a good person in that sense, but I was the Charlie Brown of my track team. I did run on track for my 4 years and everything, so I was very bad, was always losing and everything, but I was a good recruiter. So I recruited great athletes that helped us win a championship 3 years of my time there and everything. But I remember in my senior year, I was tired of losing. There was a couple of races that I might have beaten maybe one or two people, but basically finishing dead last. So I intentionally recruited a friend that I knew I could beat. Now, unfortunately, he passed on and everything, but I definitely recruited Jimmy because I knew I could beat him, and we lost the championship that year because one of the things that I did, and two, because we didn't have anybody that knew how to pole vault. Because I do remember we trying to have somebody that they could have got across the pole vault. We might have got an extra point or two and won the championship again that year. But no, I definitely recruited a friend that I knew I could beat, and therefore I probably cost us the championship. But that's what happens sometimes when you're tired of losing and you want to have a winning attitude, which I know part of your books is about winning attitudes and even dealing with criticism and things along those lines. And I said I was going to bring this up earlier. I am a notorious, and I know some other people, surprisingly, that are successful, that are notorious procrastinators, because they might procrastinate on one end of the business and not on the other end of the business. So I've seen some people that are very talented. Matter of fact, I was talking to a musician from Nigeria, and he even admitted that he was a procrastinator on some things that he didn't feel as comfortable with, even though he felt comfortable about his musical skills. So why do you think we as humans do procrastinate as much as we do?
Oh gosh, that's a long question you got there. I mean, there's so many different reasons why people procrastinate, and it can be because there's a hidden fear that if we get it done, we'll be criticized. So, for example, let me take the creative arts. So I have a friend of mine who I think, and many others think, he's a brilliant cartoonist. But unless the cartoon was perfect for him, he would never publish it. And so he had this inner perfectionist going on. And the thing about perfectionists are always looking for what's wrong. They hardly ever look for what's right. And that's a pretty hard pattern to put on yourself. And, you know, we're talking about generational stuff, and often it comes from, you know, we behave in a certain way because that's the way our parents behaved, or our grandparents behaved, or great-great-grandparents. So sometimes a pattern of behavior can get passed on from one to another. So if a child, for example, has two parents who are highly critical, then whatever they do, it's going to never be enough. Right. So if they produce something in the world, they pretty much know it's going to be criticized. And when they're criticized, they're going to feel bad about themselves as a human being. So it would make sense to procrastinate. Put off the bad feeling that you know you're going to get. But the problem with that is it might be such a good strategy, but it stops you doing the things that you truly want to do. So for me, it's looking at behavior and going, so what's the payoff? So if someone is procrastinating, what's the consequence? What happens from that? And is that consequence something that they are happy with? Or is it something that they need to deal with and confront? So the problem, a lot of our behavior is unconscious. We're unaware of it, but it's still running us. So there are some things that I procrastinated about, and quite happily, doing my taxes. You can edit this, I guess.
Yes.
So I know one of the things that I'll procrastinate over the years is doing my tax, because I just don't like doing that. But for some people, they'll get their tax done because they're going to get a refund. So we'll either move towards pleasure or away from pain. So if someone's not doing their taxes, whether it's me or somebody else, it's either because they figured that there's no gain, so I'm not going to get a refund, why bother? Or the other thing that will get them doing it is fear of retribution from the tax department or the IRS. Right. So it's when we're not moving towards pleasure or away from pain, and we're in the middle, that's when people tend to procrastinate, because there isn't enough pleasure, nor there's enough pain coming away. So apart from that, get my book.
No, we definitely got to get the book. And the book sounds like a great book to get. The other thing I was getting ready to mention, and I've brought it up on a couple of these shows on a few times, and it's been dealing with people that have been in that same space, including myself. But you also talk about self-sabotage. And I know that even in the jobs that I have gone for, and I've mentioned this in a previous show, there have been jobs that I might be matter of fact, I was qualified for, but I would sit there and give all the reasons not to go for the job. And then, of course, by the time you decide to go for the job or the contract, right, there has also been contracts as well that have been similar and everything, the job is gone. So there's no job for you to have because you're always talking to yourself. And I know that's one of the other things you talk about is how we sometimes talk ourselves out of stuff, whether it's relationships or whether it's jobs or whether it's even family dynamics. So what is it about that human spirit that causes us, in your mind, to do as much self-sabotage as we do? Because it's not just me. I've heard these stories from several other people as well, including some that are fairly well off.
I would say this is something that happens to every single human being on the planet, bar none. So if I could put this simply, there's a part of us, I believe, that is highly creative, and it wants to create all kinds of things in our world, whether it's for ourselves personally or for as a form of contribution, doesn't really matter. So we're all highly creative. Now, I didn't think I was creative in my 20s. So my two best friends, one could write poetry, write beautiful letters. The other one could play guitar, could sing. So two highly creative human beings. And I came from the world of computers. This is before Apple. So it was big mainframe machines, black and white, very logical. So these two guys were highly creative, and I didn't think that I was. It was only when I started to do some self-exploration, who am I, what am I doing on this planet, that I realized that I am a highly creative human being. In fact, everyone is a highly creative human being. So on one side, we've got the creative part of us, and on the other side is the part of us whose job it seems to be is to pull us down. Now, in Australia, we have this tall poppy syndrome. Like if you get too high, you're going to get chopped down. In America, you don't seem to have that at all. It's like you celebrate people getting to the top. Here in Australia, we don't. So there's a part of us that's creative, another part of us who is the self-saboteur, you're an imposter, the internal dialogue, the internal critic, what makes you think you can do this, etc. And it's kind of like that American Indian story of the bad wolf and the good wolf. Right. And whichever one you feed, that you're going to get more of. So part of the dilemma as a human being is, which wolf do we listen to, the good wolf or the bad wolf? Do we listen to our creative self, or do we listen to the part of ourselves that does the self-doubting? And I've worked with some highly creative people that still have this, am I good enough really? I've only got 3 Oscars or whatever it might be. We're at the top here. Am I still good enough? And so this is probably always going to go on. And so the first thing is to become awake, to become aware of what's going on unconsciously. And once you're awake, that's not the end of it. The thing is staying awake. So this is basically listening to our internal dialogue and asking ourselves, is this the kind of conversation I really want to take to heart? Is this the conversation that I really want to listen to? Because no matter where we get to in life, how successful externally or even internally we are, there's still that part that does the doubting. So it just depends on who you're going to feed today. Now, every morning, pretty much every morning, I do a routine. And part of that routine is me choosing where I want to be, how I want to set myself up. So if I do that, like first thing in the morning, my day will flow from that. If I do it halfway through the day, then the first half of the day may not be as good as it could be because I haven't made a conscious choice as to which one I'm going to follow, my creative self or my not so creative self. And this is just a matter of discipline. And, for a lot of people that I've worked with, that can be highly compassionate people, and they'll be compassionate to everybody else but themselves. So ask, well, how is it that you can be so caring and compassionate to other people? But if I was to listen to your internal dialogue, I would think it'd be World War III going on. So how is it that we can't treat ourselves with the same kind of humanity that we treat other people? And part of that is being awake, listening to who we listen to. And, I'm sure this is the same in America. One of the default programs that I have inside my head is when someone says ABC, whatever that might be, I need to be able to distinguish between a fact and an opinion. And for example, as soon as a politician says, and the fact of the matter is, I know they're going to give me an opinion.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, I'm holding a pen in my hand and I say to the world, hey world, what do you think of this pen? I just made it. And someone says, well, that's a lousy pen. Does that make me a lousy person? No, because they're talking about the pen.
Right.
They're not talking about me. And if they say, Bill, that's a beautiful pen, does that make me a beautiful person? Well, no. I mean, I am. But not about. So I need to be able to distinguish two things. The fact of this pen, it's mostly black and there's a little bit of white writing on it. That's a fact. Right. If someone says it's good or bad, beautiful or ugly, whatever, that's an opinion. So the other thing I need to be aware of is whose opinion of this pen or me am I going to honor? Let's take online social media trolling. Right. Something on Twitter, you say something and someone from the other side of the planet says something really mean and nasty, designed to hurt, and it is designed to hurt, but it's anonymous. What they're giving is an opinion. So are we going to take their opinion and place it above our opinion about ourselves? But sadly, a lot of people do. They do something, 99% is right, 1% is wrong. They give themselves heaps of grief because of the 1%. So, we need to distinguish, who are we going to honor? Are we going to honor ourselves? Are we going to treat ourselves with respect? Are we going to give somebody else a power, somebody else's opinion, who is anonymous, a power over how we feel about ourselves? Now, I've worked with golfers over the years, and there'll probably be several golfers that are listening to this. And often what happens is, depending on their score that day, that's how they will feel for the rest of the week until they have the next golf game. So if they've had a really good score, they're great. But if they had a really bad score, the ball's going to the creek and the lake and everything else, and they're flubbing shots, then they'll be depressed for days or weeks or months even, while they remember that one bad shot that they did, and they play it again and again and again. And that's just, we get what we pay attention to. So one of the principles that kind of evolves from the book is whatever we pay attention to, that's what I get. That's what we're going to get more of. So, for example, if a child is given more attention when they're sick than when they're well, that's how you grow hypochondriacs. If a child is given more attention when they're bad than when they're good, that's how you create someone who's a bad human being, because that's the behavior that you're always acknowledging, always paying attention to. But it's the same with us. one of the habits, if you like, is when I go to sleep, often I'll ask myself, so what are the things that I like about what I've done today? And I'll go through a list of the things that I like about what I've done today. Then I'll ask myself, so if I was to do anything differently, what would it be? Well, I might have changed this, I would have done this, whatever it might be. So there's no criticism in those two questions. But what there is building on what has worked. And then if I was to do it again, what could I do to make it easier, more effective, whatever it might be? So a lot of this is things that I learned 40 years ago from my mentors. And really what I'm doing, I'm merely the vehicle, if you like, to bring some of these stories and some of these principles back out so that more people can, if I had learned all this stuff as a teenager, I would have asked way more girls out than I did, because I'd had this internal conversation. I'd go to a dance and see a girl, I'd start walking towards her, I'd go halfway across the dance floor, then I'd turn around and come back, because the conversation in my head was, what makes you think she's going to dance with you? Blah, 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 blah. And so my inner conversation would just stifle me, and I wouldn't take so many risks, I wouldn't chance things, because my internal conversation would just stop me dead. So enough of that. But so any younger people listening to this, pay attention, like really monitor your internal dialogue and decide, hey, is that worth listening to, or is that just absolute crap and rubbish? And you need to drop it from your conversation.
It's interesting you said that, because I remember doing that both as a young man and being a school-age kid, but also even in my adult life. Because like I said, I'm in my 50s and still in that single space. And I know that there have been cases where I have did what I just talked about in terms of careers in relationships as well, where you're sitting there going like, no, I'm not going to approach that woman because I think that she's going to say no, or I'm not as comfortable as I should be in my own self and things of that nature. And ironically, I do remember one case, and that was when I was in college, and I found out that person had as much interest in me as I had in them, but I never knew it because I was having that conversation with myself and defeating myself before even going after and trying to court the young lady and everything. But like I said, I learned later, because sometimes it comes back to those sabotagers and some of those critics, because sometimes critics can be critics for a reason. They might have their own agenda, because I found out that some of those people did not want to tell me about that person's reaction and toward me, because they were afraid that I might have gone ahead and stepped forward, and maybe they had their own agenda of wanting to go after them for whatever their reasons were and things along that line. But I have been in those situations, and I've also been in situations where sometimes you wish that they would tell you, because even in job situations and in social situations, I found out that there were nightmares that I stepped into that you wish your mentors would have told you about, and all of that. But they were afraid that you weren't going to listen, because sometimes our circle of friends are also afraid that we won't listen if we tell them the truth. And I know that I've even been in that situation as well, because they're afraid that if they tell you the truth, you're going to ignore it, because you're going to go headstrong into whatever you want to do and all of that. So I was wondering your thoughts about both of those scenarios, because I've been in both of those, but I've also had friends that have been in them as well.
Well, sometimes, you can give a piece of advice to someone, and it may be really useful, like spot on. But the other person who's on the receiving end, there may be something that's said, or they might be feeling rebellious. So let me talk about rebellion for a moment.
Right.
Rebellion is very useful because it stops us accepting the status quo forever and a day. So every generation rebels against one beforehand, and that's the way it's designed to be. Otherwise, we're just, it'd be 1540 forever, whatever it might be. So we need to rebel, but sometimes we'll do it unconsciously. Many years ago, I was teaching a weight management program with a friend of mine who's a naturopath. And I mentioned briefly like the critical parent. Right. So there's a critical parent and the nurturing parent, and there's like the child part in us. And this woman, so I was explaining about parent, adult, and child. And when I started talking about the critical parent, she's going, wow, that's in my head. And every time, my critical parent says, you can't eat that, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to eat it. So she would rebel against her internal critic just so she could prove that she was a sovereign human being.
Mm.
So sometimes we can be rebellious, but not in a very intelligent way.
Right.
We're doing it to prove that we're in charge of ourselves, even if that what we're doing isn't good for us. So sometimes we need to just check in with our rebellion and go, was this actually serving me? Or actually, they may not be delivering the message in a way that I like, or the words that I use, or the tone of voice, but heck, that's actually good for me. And that can be a challenge sometimes, sometimes in couples. One person will say this and they won't do the opposite because they don't want to be told what to do. But maybe the advice that they've been given is actually spot on. So, it's kind of coming back to being conscious, being aware, and really listening to, because there's two things. One is the message and the other one is the delivery. The message might be pure, it might be really useful, but sometimes people aren't always that good at doing the delivery. They might use a tone of voice or phrase or whatever, or body posture that irks the other person, so they'll just ignore it. And a friend of mine was talking to me about someone that they know that they wanted to give some advice to in a good-hearted and sincere way, but they knew the other person probably wouldn't listen. So I said, well, one of the ways that you can get people to listen is to wait until they're in pain, because when people are in pain, they're more likely to pay attention. So if they're in pain, you don't tell them what they should do. You say something like, hey, I noticed that you're really struggling with this, and I've come across some things that might help you. When you're ready, let me know, and I'll share them with you. So you don't tell them what it is, but you open the door and say, when you're ready, come and let me know. So then when they do say, hey, I want to hear about that thing that you're talking about, they're actually ready to listen. But if you just tell people stuff and they're not ready to listen, or they don't, whatever reason, it's pointless. You're better off allowing them to experience some pain. And then when they are in pain, open the door by giving an invitation. You're not pushing your solution in their face. You're simply saying, hey, I've got some ways of dealing with that. When and if you're ready, come and talk to me.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I know that some friends of mine sometimes are very in tune to tone of voice, and I'm not always in tune to tone of voice. I'm very good with listening and the sense of doing interviews and things of that nature, but they will sometimes call me out because they will feel that my tone is not the tone that it should be and all of that. So in communication skills, how important is tone, and how often do you even recognize your own tone? Because I am notoriously bad for not even knowing what my tone is sometimes, and they will call me out on that. They'll be like, I recognize that tone or didn't like that tone or whatever, and I'm not always good at recognizing my own tone. So I'd love to know your thoughts about tone and how important it is.
Okay, so the first thing, like talking about your circumstance, if people are telling you, your tone isn't working with me, then that's an opportunity for you, if you wish, to take on some feedback. But underneath that is the question, do you want to hear that? Like, do you care? And if you do care, you'll pay attention to the feedback that you get. But if you don't care, that you won't. So part of that is, what intention you have about changing your behavior, and is it important to you or not? And I'm not just talking about you. This is really a generalized statement for everybody, that we will change the things that we do because it matters to us, or the relationship matters to us enough. But people will always be giving us clues, whether it's directly, verbally, as maybe people have given you, or it might be in their facial expression or their body language, or what happens to their energy, or what happens to their energy when you tell them something. Does it go up? Does it go down? So if you're getting feedback, hey, that's great. People are giving feedback. Often people won't give you feedback, so you don't know that you're doing something. So thank you. That's just triggered a thought. Criticism can be very useful, like in the corporate world, but even in personal life. We need to be able to take critique so we can maybe adjust or change our behavior. But for some people, they take things too much to heart. They take things personally. So coming back to this good old pen I've got here in my hand, I make this pen, and if I'm a sensitive human being, what and this is something I've done. It might be a book, it might be a piece of art, it might be whatever it might be, something that I've created, and I place it really close to my heart. So when someone criticizes the pen, the book, the piece of art, their finger slips and it touches my heart. So I equate the criticism of my book, my pen, the piece of art, and I make it about me, when they may actually be criticizing the pen, the book, or the piece of the art. So we need to be able to separate who we are as human beings and what we do as human beings. We are connected, but they're not the same. It's like when someone is in a corporate job and they have a title, or they have, for artists, this is really hard. They become world famous, etc. Then they get to a certain age, they don't get the scripts, or they don't get the music, or whatever might happen, then they start to go down. And then you see them watching movies of themselves when they were 30, trying to relive those old days. It's like because they have attached their identity on what they have done. And I've worked with elite athletes who were world champion. And when they've quit their sport, then who are they? Mm-hmm. In their own head, they're no one, because they put so much into their identity of what they had been done, or what they'd done, or what they were doing, as if that makes them a human being. So we were human beings way before we were famous or infamous or whatever it might be. So in the corporate world, we need to be able to give and receive critique. Otherwise, how can anyone progress in their career or in their business? So we need to be able to take critique on, but do it in such a way which we go, okay, is this a fact or is this an opinion? And is their opinion actually worth me paying attention to? Are they saying some things about me or what I've been doing that I actually need to address? Otherwise we become delusional, become, as we say in Australia, legends at our own lunchtime. I don't know if you have that, that's in the United States. But we become delusional. We need external feedback, but we need to be able to process that in a way which is intelligent and useful and relevant to us as human beings.
I can definitely understand that. Why do you think that sometimes it's actually one of the things that I know that comes up in your book, and I know I've been guilty of this as well, even in business decisions, but why do you sometimes think that we say no to things that we should definitely not be saying, say no to things that we should be saying yes to, and vice versa? Because sometimes we kind of get it mixed up and everything. So there are things that we probably should be saying no to that we don't say no to, and there are things that we probably should be saying yes to that we don't do. So kind of that opposite reaction. And it's something that I see happening in corporate America. I see it happening in creative America. I've definitely been in situations where people have put me in that situation. It's like, yeah, I'll go ahead and do it, even though in your mind, it's probably not healthy for you, either financially, mentally, emotionally, or whatever.
So part of the work that I do is a coaching methodology which connects ancient wisdom from 10,000, 20,000 years and modern neuroscience. So we talk about three major intelligences, one in our head, one in our heart, and one in our gut. And when all three are aligned and on the same page, we make very, very wise decisions. Mm-hmm. But if our head's going one direction, our heart's going another, and our gut's, nowhere to be seen, then we're going to be making lousy decisions. So one of the other things I know from studying this particular model is when someone is standing correctly, posturally, their heart is slightly ahead of their head. Mm-hmm. So we are biologically and physically designed to lead from our heart. And our head brain and our gut brain are there to serve the heart. Mm. So when there's something that we want, and our heart wants it, and not just the fickle part of our heart, but the deeper core values within us, the things that are truly important to us, we need to have the courage to be able to say, yes, I'll have that. And when something comes our way, which is not aligned with us, but our head might go, hey, that's a good idea, but it's not connected to our heart, or our gut may be saying, yeah, it sounds right, but there's something tricky about this. Don't go there. So and I'm sure every single listener has had this experience. There's been times when you've listened to your gut intuition, mm-hmm. and it has basically saved your butt.
Yeah.
And there's been times when you haven't listened to your gut intuition and you wish you had it done because your ass has just been kicked around the neighborhood.
Mhm.
So our gut brain is always, warning us about danger, but also letting us know when there's an opportunity that we can step into. So part of this is about boundaries, about how clear we are on what's important to us and what we say yes to. And also when something is diverging from that and going, yeah, it's kind of close, but it's not really it. It's not like the real thing. So we need to be able to have lead from the heart, but have a head, a creative brain serve the heart. And if you look at the world, well, in my view, when you look at the world and the heart and the head have become disconnected, especially in the corporate world, environmental and human disasters happen. Greed takes over. And I don't need to tell you about that in your country and in our country and around the world. So when we're not listening to our heart and just the head is running the show, disaster is pretty close behind. So in terms of, the question that you're asking, it's about boundaries, about how clear are we on what's important to us. And when we are, then a head brain knows what kind of things to think and what kind of decisions to offer to your heart. And the gut brain, which is the general, in traditional Chinese medicine, this is really interesting. In traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, etc., the heart brain is called the emperor or the empress. The head brain is the governor, the organizer, and the gut brain is the general.
Okay.
So the general is in charge of security. Financial security, emotional security, all kinds of different security. It's in charge of what we've taken on board, literally, and it's that deep sense of who we are as a human being. But both the governor and the general are designed to serve the emperor or the empress. So we need to make decisions which are aligned with our heart first, and when we do that, our life always gets better. But when we ignore that, that's when our life literally turns to shit. Excuse the expression. So we need to pay attention to all these three intelligences, and they all have a different role to play. And we need to understand that they have different things that they do, and we make wiser decisions rather than just one part of us making an ad hoc decision.
No, that makes a whole lot of sense. One thing that I've been noticing during this pandemic, and I've actually been even working on something that's part of that, is that it seems like more of us have been getting in touch with our childhood. And I know that part of the book that you talk about is even some of your childhood memories that have influenced the books that you've written and everything. But it does seem like more of us have gotten in touch with our childhood. I know that in this time, I hooked up, and I knew him from the past, but hooked up through Clubhouse with a gentleman named IPC, who has a group called the Funky Eye Puppets, and they have this mantra, or the mantra of the storyline is Matsu, music and art together, supporting unity. But a lot of it is about coming back in tune with that childlike wonderment that we as adults lost, and all of that. And that's kind of the storyline of the fictional characters and all of that. But I've seen that not just from that, but even some other things that I've seen in Clubhouse, on Facebook, and a number of other places. So I was just wondering, is that something that you've observed even in your own work? And how important was it for you to go back and think about your childhood, and not just the corporate part, which was more of an adult life, but how those childhood memories and how they resonated with you and also helped create the person that you are now?
Yeah. Well, so some of my experiences in primary school, and I'll talk about this in the book, basically left an impression on me and influenced the rest of my life. Two instances in particular. One, when I was, our teacher, my favorite teacher was, we're learning singing, and everyone wanted to be in the choir. And I'd never sung before in my life, I don't think. So all the little kids are lined up, and our teacher is listening to every child and says something to that child. So I'm singing my heart out. She says something to me, and what she said stayed with me for at least 40 years. And so when we're young, it's like a blank piece of paper. Any mark that's made on that piece of paper will have a strong effect. Now, the thing that I didn't understand at the time, what she was giving was an opinion based on, 2 seconds of listening to me. Right. But that had an influence on me. the other teacher, one of my favorite teachers again, he was reading out essays that were all written, a descriptive essay. And again, he made a comment about my essay. And again, what he said influenced the rest of my life. And the point really is that both these teachers said things out of innocence. They were just reflecting, in their opinion, what had happened. But as a child, I don't have the same thinking capacity as I do now. And both those circumstances influenced my life. And the way I like to kind of explain this, and if there was a gift that I could give your listeners, I'm about to give this gift. This is probably one of the most important things I learned. It's 40 years ago and with one of my mentors that really helped me to understand myself at a deeper level. So we were doing a training program for about a year. We're learning about transactional analysis, gestalt therapy, body therapy, a whole bunch of really groovy things. And one weekend, he said to us, life is meaningless. Now, given the context of what we're doing, that was kind of a shocking thing to say. What do you mean, life is meaningless? You know, we're here to find the meaning of life, what we're here for, etc. And he went on to explain, and on the flip chart, he put the word event, and he drew a circle around it. And he said, every single day, you will have hundreds, thousands of events. And every event, from birth to death and everything in between, is meaningless, is innocent. It's purely an event. And okay, so we're taking that in. And he went on to explain that for example, I'm walking down the street. I see someone that I know and I wave hello. And let's say they ignore me. In nanoseconds, I've made up some kind of meaning about them, about how rude they are, or about me, about how unimportant I am, whatever it might be. So there's at least two meanings that can be made of that single event of him ignoring me. But there could be a third, there could be a fourth, there could be a fifth. There could be a dozen different meanings. One meaning I might make is, oh, okay, he's looking a bit distracted. I might just check in with him, see if he's okay. And John Barnaby, my mentor, said, every meaning that we choose is always self-chosen. We choose the meanings that we make. Nobody else. We choose the meanings. But whatever meaning we choose becomes our reality. So if I make a meaning about that event, he's a nasty person or I'm a worthwhile person, whatever it might be, that meaning then becomes my reality. So, and then he went on, this is a real kicker. He said, it doesn't matter whether the meaning that you're making is true or not. The real question is the meaning that you're making out of this event useful or not? And he said, that's the most important question to answer. So we were kind of sitting with this. And then about a week later, my girlfriend said something to me. And I took it to mean, something bad, whatever it was. And I started doing my own angsting. Why she say that? Blah, 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 blah. And then I asked myself, okay, so Bill, what's the meaning that you're making about what you just said? And under every meaning, there'll be a meaning underneath that. Right. And then a deeper meaning, and then a deeper meaning. So I just kept on following my thoughts until I came down to the deepest meaning that I can make about what she said. And she was just a trigger for something within me. That's all. And then I asked myself, so is the meaning that I'm making, is it actually useful to me anymore? And it plainly wasn't. So I just dropped that meaning and it changed the rest of the afternoon was completely different. Because I had taken responsibility for the meanings that I'm making out of my life. And then I'm asking myself the hard question, is it useful or not? So I've used this last 2 years has been the most divisive I've lived in my life. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of people. Okay. So, and all kinds of things. And it's changing day by day. The circumstances change. So how do I, as a human being, have some level of control over what happens? Now, I can't control the world. I've given up trying to do that a long time ago. The thing that I can do is take charge of how I am and how I am with myself, because that's really the only thing that I can control. And John, again, taught us that there are 3 levels of responsibility that we can take. The first one is for what we think. So whatever I choose to think about what is going on in the world, that will become our reality. So that's one thing. The second thing is being charged of my emotional reactions and responses to the world. That's the second thing. That's probably the toughest in my view. And the third one is being responsible for the things that we do. And he said, to the degree that we take responsibility for those 3 levels in our life is the degree of happiness and fulfillment that we will have. And those words are as true now as they were 40 years ago when he first told them to us. But every day, it's like being awake is one thing, staying awake, that's the key. So coming back to all of this, and when you're talking about childhood, for me, it's never too late to be a 5-year-old. If you look at a 5-year-old, they've got so much energy, so much vibrancy, they're so alive, so creative. They see the world with wonder and amazement. And if I can, I vowed, like in those early days, I want to take my 5-year-old with me wherever I go. And I've met people in the 80s and then 90s, and they're still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed because that free child inside of them has never gone away. And in my view, it's never too late to be a 5-year-old. We can always bring that spirit, and that will keep us alive. But I've met people in their 20s that kind of got glazed over and they've just dulled their vitality and their childlike energy. And what a waste, because that's a part of us, I believe, and my experience, that gives us vitality and gives us sparkle and juice and piss and vinegar and all those things that we need to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
No doubt about that. As you were saying it, I was thinking to myself about another principle that you're very much about and everything, which is this idea, not just on the childhood side, but on the, for lack of a better term, and I hate this term, but the sunset years or the latter years and everything, and how you can actually even become a legend at that time. And as I was thinking about that, and I was reflecting on that, I was thinking about the fact that my dad is 82 and a relatively well-known statewide, and I would even argue regionally known artist here in this area and everything. And I want to say that he got involved in the arts when he was like maybe in his 60s. He had several other careers before that, but then he became very involved in the art probably in his early to mid 60s, and has been doing it for a number of years ever since, and all of that. So I just wondering, what kind of message would you give to people to continue pursuing even as they continue getting older? Because I've also seen a lot of folks that are continuing to pursue their dreams. Like I've got a friend of mine who's a few years older than me, so he's probably in his early 60s, and he is still pursuing his dream of being a success again, because he's been a success before, but a success again in that funk music space and all of that. So I just wondering your message to those that are in the later years, for whatever term that might be. So some people that might be the 50s, some people that might be the 80s. I'm personally trying to go for 200.
Well, I reckon 70 is the new 40, but that's, personal point of view. So you may be familiar with the idea of a second wind. Like in athletes, for example, when they're running, they hit the wall and then they have a second wind. And the second wind is actually more powerful than their first wind, right? Because they've gone through the hardship of the first wind. Now they're more on cruise control. There's more flow, there's more effort. They've got all the experience to back them up. But, and I've talked with people in their 50s and 60s, and I say, hey, listen, if you're still alive, if you're still breathing, there's still stuff for you to do. And the second wind is us recognizing that no matter how old we are, there's always something we can do, and that will bring joy to ourselves, that will bring joy maybe to other people. But it's when we stop and we give up that basically people, they just wither and die. And you may be familiar with The Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell, his work. So very briefly for your listeners, if they haven't heard this, just, do a search on The Hero's Journey. But basically, if you've ever watched any Walt Disney movie, The Hero's Journey will be in it. If you've watched the Hobbit series, if you watch J.K. Rowling, listen to any of all those works, there's always someone starts in a village. They're kind of bored, they know everyone, everything's familiar, and they have a call to adventure. like in Harry Potter, it's the owl with the envelope and the letter. And usually what they do, they decline the first call to adventure because it's safe where they are. But there's some part of us, the spirit inside of us goes, hey, there's more stuff to be done. So as soon as we pick up the call to adventure, the first thing that happens is we are surrounded by allies and friends and people that would support us. And then right after that comes the first battle, the first evil element that comes in, the demons, whatever, that try to attack us. So then we are victorious in that battle, but then it goes bigger and bigger. So more friends, more enemies, more friends, more enemies, and it comes to the final Armageddon, the final big battle. I've just watched June, which I think has just come out in the last couple of weeks. And the big battle at the end, and this is what happens. And the very last battle is an inner battle. It's the battle that we have with ourselves, where all our demons, coming back to the original conversation of the self-saboteur, the self-saboteur in us sees us and the creative part of us winning, and it does everything in its power to drag us down again back into the mud, to keep us safe, to keep us ordinary, to keep us from succeeding, because otherwise we might get criticized. But of course, in the hero's journey, we are victorious over that inner demon within us. And then we come back to our village and we are victorious. We're changed human beings. But we come to the village, and the village is exactly the same as we left it. The people are having the same conversations, eating the same food, doing the same things. And we can relax back into the village. And then the battle is, how do we deal with the mundaneness, if you like, of life? And we rest for a while. So when we first went to primary school, that was a hero's journey. High school was a hero's journey. University, first relationships, first marriage, first divorce, first child. All these are first career, second career. These are all different hero's journeys. And we keep on going till the day we die. So the book for me was another hero's journey. The part of me going, no, what makes you think I'm going to read this book? Who cares? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. So there's all my inner demons, trying to claw me down. I'm going, now stuff you. I'm doing this stuff, whether you like it or not. So it doesn't matter how old we are. It's never too late to be a legend, whatever that might be. There's never too late to be a 5-year-old. That energy is always waiting for us, and it's just one breath away. All it needs is recognition, a little blowing on the ember, and it will burst into life.
It sounds like it can definitely burst into life and everything. I was actually thinking about another guest I had on that long ago, Marianne Alda, who was one of the original African-American women that was on the early soap operas. I think she was either on all, I'm trying to think of which one she was on. I don't think it was General Hospital, but it was one of those that she was on and everything. But she is now in her, I want to say late 70s or early 80s, and she wrote a play called Getting Old is a word that is oftentimes associated with female dogs, and I'm going to wrestle that word down to the ground and everything. And she even talks about how she is determined to let women know that they don't have to give up on their sexuality and their dating life even when they get older, because she feels that she's just as vibrant now as she was in other parts of her life, and she also has more experiences that she's able to bring to the forefront in that experience as well. And I heard you mention the fact of a girlfriend, so it sounds to me like you have that same kind of attitude from a male perspective and things of that nature, because I'm thinking that the girlfriend, even if she's a wife now, was at a time that some people might consider middle-aged or something like that. So it seems like you have a similar male perspective. Is that a correct assumption on my part?
Yeah, it sure is. Our life and our vitality is entirely up to us. And whatever area of our life that we want to put into, it's like that door's open to us. We just need to open the door and go down that pathway. So, for me, it doesn't matter how old you are. Sure, as I age, there's certain things physically that I'm not 25 anymore. I've kind of come to that realization. So, I can't run, jump, etc. as much as I used to be able to. But I'm 72. I got heaps of life in me yet.
Yeah, it sounds like you got heaps of life and a lot of things to pass on to folks and things of that nature. And that was the other thing I was curious about is the mentorships. It sounds like you've had mentors all your life. So how important has mentorship been, either having it and also being a mentor?
Yeah, when I was younger, I don't know that I really knew much about the concept of of having a mentor, except that I did have them, and I'm so grateful because it just means that that you can be on the path, and when you wander off into the jungle, if you've got someone that's saying, "Hey, you're going in the wrong direction, go back here," it just helps us to get on the path and get on with the stuff that we're here for. And over the years, the work I've done in men's gatherings, becoming a mentor in that way, and then also professionally becoming a mentor in certain ways. And for me, that goes back to the story of the young lion and the old lion, that in our lifetime, even like a younger person, an 18-year-old can be a mentor to a 10-year-old.
Hmm.
A 10-year-old can be a mentor to a 3-year-old.
Right.
So, age really but it's more the process of, we're all going in the same direction in life, and some people will be ahead of us, some people will be behind of us, some people will be, on the same level or the same side. So it's a bit like helping where we can and being open to being helped when we need it to, because some people are so full of pride, there's nothing wrong with me, I don't need anything. And that's actually it's like a young lion robbing an old lion of the pleasure of giving back to the young lion.
Wow. What are some of the things as a business coach, because in a lot of ways that is what you are as a business coach, that and some of it I think you've talked about here, but what are some of the things that you wish businesses and corporations would get right that you're seeing them not get right in the 21st century? Because I'm thinking as you've been working with a lot of people and have also been in that corporate space, that there are probably some things that you wish were changed. So if you could be able to have that magic wand and change I started to say corporate America, but we'll just say corporate world and corporate Australia.
Yeah,
What would
yeah.
that be, and everything in that regard? So,
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is culture.
mm,
And whatever the culture of an organization is, that's going to determine how people behave, the things they say yes to, the things they say no to, the way they treat their customers, the way they treat their suppliers. And I'll give an example of this. My daughter, who's just turned 30, 31, she works for an organization here in Australia, which is a startup. It's a neobank. So they basically do online banking for businesses and software for all the things that businesses need. And my daughter was working for a university here in Australia in a business accelerator startup. So she would see a lot of businesses come through, and for the work that she's done previously, she's had great experiences of really crappy bosses.
mm,
And she's also had experiences of good bosses. She's
right.
had experiences of great systems in businesses and other ones that just absolutely chaotic. So she's been blessed already with both the kind of the contrast of what really works and what doesn't work. And when she was in the university startup, one of the business that came through was kind of like a mentor to the people going through. She was looking at this particular person and how he dealt with things, and was thinking, wow, this is a really good human being. So as it turns out, when she left the university and was basically headhunted, and this particular person said, hey, there's a job here if you want it. And so she was able to become in charge of the community manager, managing the clients and also the staff in that way. And so she has a real chance of creating and being instrumental in creating such a culture. And she's already had lots of accolades for the work that she's done this. So the culture is the vehicle. It's like if I hold this glass in my hand, the structure of this glass contains the water. If I change the structure of the container, then the water itself will change its shape.
Right.
So and I've worked with some organizations, international corporations, who've had a great sense of humane culture, of win-win culture. And every time I work with an organization like that, I feel like I'm at home in their tribe. I'm a traveler, but I'm in their tribe because I really love the way they do it. But I've also been in some organizations, I can just look at the culture by what is happening and going, oh man, this is a disaster. I never want to come and work with this company again. So as I mentioned before, a lot of younger people are deciding, looking at the culture of their organization, not just what they say in their mission statement and their vision, because that's just, words, but it's how people behave and how people, I forget who it said, but someone said, you can tell the character of a person of not just how they deal with the CEO, but how they deal with the janitor, how they deal with the waiter or the waitress. Are they kind? Are they, civil? Are they, whatever it might be? So in my view, when an organization, large or small, gets culture right, they can expect magic to happen. But if they don't get their culture right, like here in Australia, we've had all kinds of shit happening in our federal parliament because the culture has been so toxic to women. And this has been a major headache for our Prime Minister because some things that ministers have done, staffs have done, it's just been horrendous. And so because the culture is such a way that it is, then that's going to infiltrate how people behave. And, I hope that they change the culture of that. And, basically when I look at governments around the world, there's very few that go, wow, they've got a really good culture going on there. Most of them stink. They're just rotten to the core. So you change culture and you change everything. And that comes to, coming back to head, heart, and gut. When the heart and the deep values of being a human being are allowed to thrive and to flourish, people will do good things. In the work I do in men's gatherings here in Australia, we have a certain culture, we have a certain way of expressing what we think and what we feel, not blaming it onto everybody else, but taking ownership of that. So that's the culture of what's been created, and that culture creates the behavior. Get culture right, things will flow. But if you don't have the culture right, shit's going to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I was actually just thinking about a skit that I wrote. Actually, I guess it would be considered like a mini play or something like that, but it was a series of plays, and it was actually one that was done in like a series of vignettes that people did. And I wrote one of them, and one of them was called Confessions of a Buppy, which is kind of like a African-American version of a yuppie and everything. And that was actually one of the storylines. It was somebody that was going to the corporate America, and they were having influences, and they were talking to people, and one of the people that they talked to was the janitor who gave them a lot of very prominent advice and good advice. And the point that the janitor made within the story was that while he might have been cleaning, he was also observing and learning a lot both about the culture and about other things. So he was trying to get this particular character to understand that he might want to listen to what he had to say because he had learned a lot from being observant. And I know that even here, we have this area called Black Wall Street. There's a lot of Black Wall Streets in America, but one of them is in Durham, North Carolina. And two of the founders actually used to cut hair for a lot of the European Americans and things of that nature. And that's where they learned some of their business tricks, because they were cutting for the hair of like the Vanderbilts and the Dukes and some of that. So it was like them going to college, even though I don't know that they went to either our local quote unquote black college or any of the other colleges, but they had a education by just cutting some of the tycoons' hairs and hearing them making their power moves. And I'm sure that they were taking mental notes, because that's part of the story of how they created this enclave that was very much of a well-known enclave before gerrymandering and other things happened that caused that to be destroyed. But it was just interesting hearing that. And so as you were saying that, I was going like, wow, those stories travel the world, and they oftentimes are in the different cultures, and they oftentimes are similar type stories, even though you're talking about something that was based on Australia, and what I'm describing is something that happened in the Carolinas during the segregation time. But it's like these life lessons that we learn oftentimes go across generations and across boundaries. And that's part of what I was thinking about as you were telling that story, because it sounded so similar in that regards.
Yeah. There are some stories that go through, the human race that are timeless, that they're all cultures. And like the hero's journey is one that goes through all cultures, all eras, all time frames as part of us being a human being. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt that hero journey is one that we hear, whether it's
Mm.
some of the Roman heroes or whether it's the heroes from like the Indian cultures or some of the other heroes that are out there. So you're right, that hero journey is one that we hear. And you had mentioned this man's group. So I was just wondering, Bill, how important is spirituality and faith in your own journey? Because I'm imagining that when you describe it, it sounds like it's a faith-based group. And I know that I've been part of like some man circles in some of the Christian churches and all of that. But how important is not so much religion, but spirituality in your own journey?
Mm. So, yeah, I think when I first became aware that there was a spiritual nature with me, and I separate this from religion because, in my view, sometimes religions don't always get that. But just like the human spirit, and that's, I guess, when I first kind of woke up to that, it just led me to experience and know that there was a different part of my consciousness rather than the one that was just operating like day in, day out. And in the men's work that I've been involved in, there's always a recognition, not religious, but a spiritual recognition. There's a part of us that's bigger than us, that lasts, it is timeless. And it's always the most innermost part of our consciousness. And for me, when I tap into that innermost part, that's where I experience the most peace, the most gentleness, the most compassion. That's a place that, no matter how rocky the road is, when I go there, that's the place where I can rest, and I can have deep, intimate conversations with this particular part of me, and get some wisdom coming my way. And it's like, sometimes for me, I have to be really quiet. I have to really give myself the space to allow my inner dialogue to quieten and quieten and quieten. And it's in the deepest silence within me that I hear and I get the most profound messages in my life. And being in nature, like, we chose to live in this place called an eco village. So we are surrounded by beautiful nature. And for many people that I know, just going and hugging a tree, lying in a field, being near to a stream, water, whatever it might be, and getting all the things from man-made as far away from that, so we can come back down to the real raw essence of the depth that nature can restore us. And that's something I've done since my early 20s. And I tend to be more of an introvert than an extrovert, so meaning that I get my energy from the inside than from the outside. So if I've been doing a lot of outer work, I know I have to spend some time with myself in quietness and in solitude. And that's how I recharge my batteries. And I've also journaled for many parts of my life, sometimes daily. There's a book I read many years ago called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which I highly recommend. It's like a 3-month writing exercise that you do. And basically she says that our spirituality, our spiritual nature, and our creative energy are the same. You can barely separate them. So when you tap into your creativity, you're tapping also into your spiritual nature. And yeah, that's the way that I experience life. And, above all the things, that we've talked about here, for me, it's always life is an inside-out experience. The deeper I go on the inside, the richer my life is on the outside. But the less I go on the inside, the less quality I have on the outside. So it's always, when I want to refresh, going back down to center, back into my heart.
Wow, that's fascinating. Well, I could sit here and talk to you for hours on end, but I know that we can't really to wrap up everything. But I definitely wanted you to have you come back and everything. But one thing
please.
that I
Yes.
definitely always get all my guests to do and everything is to give their message of positivity, their message of encouragement, and things that they would like to see happen in this world as we're coming out of, hopefully, this pandemic. Hopefully in 2022 we'll be somewhat, maybe even totally out of it, but who knows, it might be 2023 or 2024. Only the man above knows that, or the fourth above, I should say. But hopefully we'll get out of it in some form or fashion in 2022. But I'd love to hear your message of positivity and ways that folks can get you and also get a copy of the book.
Okay, so let me start with a phrase that a couple that I've come across that have really helped me. And one is that everything must pass. This too will pass, right, has been one of my favorite, especially when my daughter was going through her teenage years and all that angsting. I remember this too will pass, and it did. So that's one. But one of the other, my favorite quotes is from the Course in Miracles, and that is that love brings up everything unlike itself for the purpose of healing. So if some shit happens in my life, there's an opportunity for me to go deeper. And if it's a conflict with another human being, then what it's doing is allowing something from that I haven't recognized yet, or some part of me that I've pushed aside or denigrated or whatever, it's giving me an opportunity to bring it into the light where I can actually heal it. So love brings up everything unlike itself for the purpose of healing. And in the coming months and years, none of us can predict what's going to happen.
Right.
None of us. We live in such a world that's so volatile, unpredictable. There's uncertainty at every corner. So that we cannot control. But what we can do is control our responses to all those things that are going on. So if I was to leave a final message, it would be say, listen to your heart. You know, your heart knows. It's just hanging out and waiting for us to listen to it. So in terms of where people can get a hold of me, my website is bulletproofromcriticism.com.au. And I've just created a quiz where people can rate themselves about how bulletproof they are. And we deal with internal criticism and external criticism. It takes 2 minutes maximum to do that. That's free. They'll get a free report. That's one thing. In this coming months, next couple of months, I'm creating a new program, which is an online workshop. So it's not just me talking, it's me doing things with people and people working stuff through exercises. And that's on turning your inner critic into your best friend. Because if your inner critic isn't your best friend, then you're probably working against yourself. The book itself, you can go to Amazon, and if you look for either my name, Bill Lee Emery, with a hyphen in between, or if you just search for the book, How to Be Bulletproof from Criticism, you'll find the book there. And I would be delighted, once you've read it, to give me a review. 5 stars is best, and some comments. And please get in contact with me. This is something that I've been doing for a long time, and I love it to bits. Oh, it seemed to be present. No. So you there, Mark?
I am here. I had to answer the door. The neighbor was knocking on the door, checking on something and all of that. But I did answer the door, catch up with them. But yes, I definitely heard about how they can get the book and about the course and all of that. So I appreciate you being on. And this was a truly amazing conversation. And I definitely look forward to having you come back on and everything. Are there any other parting words that you would like to leave and everything? I know that one of the things you talk about is the concepts from the book. And you say that there are 3 key concepts. And I don't know if we got to those. So what would you say are those 3 key concepts that folks should get when they get the book? Because we're going to have everybody get the book that watches the network and everything. So we're going to try to give you a boost in your book sales. So what are those 3 key concepts?
Okay, so we talk about inner criticism and criticism from the outside. One of the things I want to go back to is knowing the difference between a fact and an opinion. That's key, because if you don't, you're gone. The second thing is being aware of who you want to honor. Is it going to be you, or is it going to be somebody else that you don't even know that you're going to honor? So it's making sure that you're honoring yourself, and that's a really important thing. And the other one is when I was talking about, every event in life is meaningless. So when you start to really ask yourself what's the meaning of placing on this and what's underneath that and you're basically going on a hunting trip. You want to find what it is that's triggering you, that's having this reaction in the world, and then you being in charge of you. Because this is when you boil it all down, it's you being in charge of you. That's baseline, you being in charge of you.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You definitely have to be in charge of you, and you do a great job of being in charge with you and everything. Just really quickly, and like I said, I definitely want to wind down everything. What is a stereotype that you wish people did not have about Australia, and maybe particularly about Queensland? Because I'm sure that there's some stereotypes that you're saying German, like, that's not me. I'm nothing like that.
Yeah. Well, I guess we have a lot of redneck bogans, I suppose, here in Queensland. Like we're all chewing the cud, and, we've got rednecks literally, and, we swear and we cuss. Well, we swear and we cuss anyway. But, when you get to go into the outback, you find a lot of really unusual characters out there. And I've got to say that those characters are worth exploring because they can tell some amazing stories. They might be really tough on the outside, but, they've got a warm, beautiful heart on the inside.
Yeah, because I know most of the times when people think about the Outback, I think the first stereotype that people think about is that they're all like Crocodile Dundee, doing a lot of wrestling of alligators and things of that nature because of that Hollywood image that was there and because of that star that I believe came from that part of Australia, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right, Northern Territory. Well, there are a lot of characters like that, but there are a lot of really tough people out here, men and women in the country. Like anywhere, if you're a farmer, if you're living in the country, you have to be tough. And out here in Australia, the weather can be extremely cruel, if you like, with drought and with floods, etc., etc. So they become very resilient, really tough people. But underneath that toughness, I've always found a really warm heart.
Gotcha. Is there anything about American business that you find different than Australian business? Because like I said, I know a lot of times people here are always paying attention to the NASDAQ and the Dow Jones and things of that nature. I'm sure there's got to be an Australian version of that. But have you found business owners to be the same pretty much wherever they are? Or is there something distinctly different about, say, an Australian businessman versus an English businessman versus, say, an American businessman as one that has traveled and dealt with all of those?
Well, I'd say one of the things I'd say about Australians is we are very innovative. We are great inventors. But the downside of that is we don't get the backing. So we sell our inventions to all the way around the world. Americans are very good at picking up our inventions and making all the money out of it. So there are some things that you guys do way better than us. When I was in England, and I lived in England for a time, there's a certain conservativeness about that, and very traditional. And this is very stereotyping, I've got to say. From the times I've been in America and worked with Americans, there's, like, you guys are invincible. There's nothing that you can't do. You have such a inbuilt strong belief. Whether it's always based on substance, I don't know. But there's like this, I can do anything. If we're all superheroes, you would have them all, and our guys would be going, well, maybe we can, but hey, just don't jump from the tallest building. Where you guys are leaping off buildings, and but we are the inventors. I gotta say, we are the inventors.
So y'all are the better inventors, but we're the ones that actually get the credit and all that. I know some of the other things that we oftentimes get criticized for is the way that our policies are in diversity and also our gender roles in corporate America, meaning that women don't always get the same kind of respect corporate-wise that they should, even if they're the leaders of the corporation. So I was wondering if that's a similar kind of thing in Australia, because you mentioned that your daughter is in that space, and I don't know how y'all are doing in the sense of diversity, even though I know that there are different cultures there, like the Aborigines and some of the people that are coming from India and other cultures as well. Yeah. But how are y'all doing in your mind in the sense of corporate diversity and giving women their proper dues in the business space?
Yeah, not enough, in my view. Like even in Australian politics, there's a lot of conversations around not enough diversity, and not just male or female, but also cultural and ethnic diversity. I don't think we have enough. I think Canada's doing pretty well in that regard. but us not enough. We have a lot of very, very strong women leaders in business and the arts and across the board, but they're still fighting for pay equity. That hasn't happened yet, but given maybe another generation, things will be changing. And for some women that I speak to, it can never happen fast enough. But there's a lot of really smart, tough, intelligent, creative women, and I'm going, come on, like just push us out the way, push us off a cliff, whatever you got to do, like just step up and claim the space, because boy, oh boy, in my view, we need you. We need them.
Yeah, definitely sounds like they could bring some real innovation and some real idea kind of surge in there and everything along those lines. Last question I was going to ask on this particular interview is, if you could go anywhere in the next 5 to 10 years, where would that be, and what kind of trip would it be that you would take that you haven't taken yet? Because I'm sure there's someplace that's on your dream list, or maybe there's even a dream project that you would like to have as well. So whether it's a dream trip or a dream project, what would that be?
I've always wanted to go places like Tibet, and never did. I think I would like to go to Tibet as it was, say, 50 years ago. I think I would be somewhat unhappy with what's happened to Tibet in the last 50 years. Right. I would have loved to have seen it. Bhutan is another place that I would go to, which is just kind of next door. And they have, of course, gross national happiness, which is one of their measurements of working out how well the country is doing. So Bhutan is also another place that I'd go. In terms of projects, one of my things that I want to be involved in is more collaborative projects with people around the world, with heart-centered people doing some beautiful things, so I can add my skill to that, to whatever they're doing. And that's one of the things that's on my bucket list that I write down. That's where I want to go. So if you're a heart-centered person and you're running some kind of beautiful venture around the world, come talk to me. If you're listening to this interview and you reckon I've got some things I can add to the table, please call me up, find me. That's easy.
Yeah, I had to put you in touch. There was actually a young lady from Peru, I believe it is, and she's actually doing some projects around rescuing animals and rescuing things of that nature. And I think that she's I can't remember if she's originally from Peru or if she's just living there or that area, but I do know that she was doing work in the Amazon rainforest, and it really built like almost like a sanctuary city for the animals and everything else. And she was an interview maybe about a month and a half or so ago. So I'll have to put you in touch with her, because she's definitely doing a lot of that heart-centered work around rescuing and helping our animals. So as you were saying, that person came to mind, and there were some other guests that I've had that have been doing some heart-centered projects as well. But I know she was very much about helping rescue the animals, particularly as we don't always do a good job of helping Mother Nature. And it sounds like you're even doing some of that in the Echo place that you're living at as well. So I definitely need to put the two of y'all in touch with each other, because like I met you through podcast guests, I remember meeting her through Clubhouse, which is another place that I found some truly amazing guests and all of that. So on that note, I'm gonna bring the robot on that sometimes brings me on as well as brings me off and all of that. But definitely, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I do hope that you'll come back again and share some more wisdom, because I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
I have indeed, Mike, and please invite me again. So one of the things I say, if if I want to do something, I'll say yes. If I don't, I'll say no. If I offer you something, it'll only because I want to, not because of any shoulds or any sense of duty. So if you say you want me to come back, I'm very happy to come back. You just send me the invitation and I'll be there.
I would definitely do that. I would definitely do that in the not too distant future, because I'm looking forward to airing this one, as this was a pre-record, and definitely look forward to having you back on in the very near future. And of course, I don't mind making adjustments for people's schedules, because there's places that are 14 hours apart. So we have to make those schedule adjustments as well. So definitely appreciate it, and look forward to having you come back very soon.
Thank you, Mark.
All right.